time for another episode of The Summer of Me. Thank you guys so much for listening week over week. We love it here. We love it here in the summertime. For those of you that have been listening for a while, it's about to not be summer, so it's about to be the life of me, not the summer of me, but the podcast name will remain the same. But the summer of me will eventually, if you do it, it turns into just a whole lifetime of good times.
Summers.
A whole lifetime of summers. There are no other seasons. We are back with another episode of Group Therapy with Nana. Hi, Mom. Welcome.
Hello.
You look dashing and tulip red today. And we are talking about merging families, blending families, all of those lovely, joyful things. Anyways, we are talking about blending families and how the hell to do it. This is hard. Let me just be real. This is not easy. So we've blended families. I have experience in this.
A little bit.
Some. Go
ahead.
Where do we even start? My dad was married 3 times. My mom was the lucky 3rd winner. Congratulations, honey.
Thank you. Married the longest, yes.
She was married the longest, which is a bragging right. He is no longer with us. Rest in peace. But I grew up in a blended family, so to speak. My dad had 3 kids from his first wife, 1 son from his second wife, and then with my mom, he had my sister and I. So there were 6 kids total. I'm the youngest and the prettiest and the smartest and the nicest, but
narcissist.
Just kidding. But we always, everybody's like, you have 6 older siblings? One of them's 2 years younger than your mom. I'm like, yeah, don't ask questions. It's fine. It's not a big deal. But we grew up in a very blended family. Mm-hmm. And then my parents, I think I don't know, how old was I when you and Dad divorced?
21, 22.
Yeah, maybe. So it was a really different experience. My mom's now been remarried for 14 years, but that was another version of a blended family because we brought in Ray, who we love so much. And it was mixing that and trying to figure out the dynamics of everybody. And now in my own life, I obviously am divorced and have blended a family, and Rob lives with us and is part of the kids' lives and trying to do that. So I feel like I've experienced this in more ways than maybe you should, but enough to have some experience. And what I can say is it always feels daunting in the moment. Obviously, I don't remember being a part of a blended family as a kid, but going through that process, it feels impossible and scary and there's so many what ifs. But on the other side of it, it actually is can be really a beautiful thing. And I have always said, for my own experience with my own kids and stuff like that, and even, with their dad, the goal is that you find other people that love your children as much as you do. And there's no harm in finding people that love your kids. Right. There's just really not. And I think our own egos get in the way often of well, I don't want that bitch raising my kids. Well, if that bitch loves your kids and treats them right and is somebody else to be a shoulder for them to cry on or whatever, I'm all about it. You know what I mean? Put yourself aside and what is best for the family unit. Can you call it a family unit? Yeah. Before we kind of dive into questions, what's your experience with blended families? I know you probably deal with it a lot in therapy. You've dealt with it on your own. What's your kind of take on it?
So, first I'll start with my own personal experience. I was 21 years old when I married your dad, who was 22 years older than me. And when I came into the picture, my stepdaughters were 17, 15, living with us.
Would you shit a brick if you were 17 and this 21-year-old bitch moved in?
And the 10-year-old son, he lived with his mom about an hour away. And then the Bobby was was the youngest son, and he was 2 years old when I got married. Mm-hmm. And so coming into that environment was so different because I came from a very different family. Mm-hmm. My parents have been married for 63 years and 64 years, and they had a lot of structure. And so I came into an environment where there wasn't a lot of structure. And so even though I was only 21, I was a pretty old soul and pretty mature. Yeah, and very responsible. So having that happen, the first ex-wife wasn't as kind. The second one was. And so she would refer to me as Bobby's other mother. Mm-hmm. And he ultimately moved in with us, which is right around the time you were born. He was living with us full time. And so you didn't grow up knowing he was he just went to see his mom every other weekend or whatever. And she was very good to the girls. And so she and I had and still do have a wonderful relationship. So we were, I was more considered his other mother. And so with the first wife, she had a lot of the insecurities and jealousies and stuff, but that was because she wasn't being a good mom in many ways. And so I think what is different is sometimes as the step parent, you see things in a child that you don't see it in your own kids because of your biases. And sometimes if that parent is really loving, they can really help you be a better parent because they're showing insight into things that maybe you're missing. And if it's done without criticism and done in a loving way, and they're a balanced person where they're also loving on your kid, you're more likely to take that
for sure
idea. And
I've experienced that, like with Rob moving in, like he'll say like, hey, something I've seen, like, you know, like what could we do about this? And it's always like, hey, like, let's work on this together.
Right.
And,
you're not alone in it.
No, it's not like, oh, you're a shitty parent. You should like, why is your kid acting like this? It's like, hey, you know, if I could say something, like, I think that this could help.
Right. And I think, so as I feel like I had a really good relationship with my older stepdaughters and still do. I feel like, you know, I became sort of this matriarch, and they respected that I was pretty consistent because that's what I had kind of seen in life. I think where it becomes difficult is you two kids had a different childhood experience than those older kids because their mom had been, I think, married like 5 times or something. And so they had, you know, some instability around that. And so there can be jealousy amongst the kids when you're blending families. So having said that being the background, so having the personal experience of being the stepmom, having it be with you kids, and then going through the divorce, even though we were still close, you know, it's not, I didn't hate your father or anything like that.
Yeah.
We grew, and, you know, I outgrew sort of things.
Pretty amicable.
It was very amicable.
Yeah.
I talked to him every week. Having said that, I think when I got married to Ray, I didn't handle that situation as well as I wished I had in retrospect. And I think even though you guys were older now, Kendra was pregnant when her dad passed away. And so Ray became sort of the grandpa from at that point. Prior to that, the older grandkids all called him Sugar Ray. And he brought that whole family in with us. He knew I came as a big, huge family. You know, I had grandkids, and but I made a cardinal mistake when I did that. And when I first introduced him to one of the grandkids, I did not introduce him as my significant other, and that forever tainted their relationship. Yes, I didn't share. I was dealing with my own inexperience of that, but also my own shame and sick of living my life for other people. I had all my own reasons why I did it, but I thought I was protecting her, and in that way, I did the wrong thing. And that's so.
It's a common thing, though. We'll talk about that a little bit. It's a common, like, you know, I think people don't know how to operate, and so they just kind of think like, oh, I'm going to do this, and like oftentimes
I'm going to ease them into it, but the dishonesty is what really ends up causing.
And we've talked about this. I mean, even like with the kids and going through divorce and everything like that. Like, it's you tell the truth with you may not need to give all of the information, but you don't hide the truth. And I think with the kids, like going through any divorce or family thing like that, like kids are freaking smart, and they have a killer sense of smell, and they know like what is actually up. And if they don't already, they're going to find out, and they don't forget. They forget nothing. And so I think it's really important.
They do the math.
So, you know, the math is.
Yeah, there you go.
Math is, right? That's something.
It's not, don't use it for Scrabble.
Math is, yeah. We've been playing a lot of Bananagrams. Mom, how many times have you won Bananagrams?
Shut up. That's so mean.
I think Bellamy beat you this morning.
I helped her win, and Rob helped her. That's not fair.
Anyways, it's a hot topic around here. Blended families. So a couple questions that people are asking, a handful of questions. When is the best time to blend a family?
So I'm going to probably go against being a therapist's perspective on this, because they all want you to wait for a year and all of these things, and I don't have magic numbers like that, and certainly did not in my life, which is why it was difficult. Just recognize that you might be ready to move on, but that doesn't mean your family is ready to move on. And especially young kids, but even older ones. I have several people in my practice right now whose older parent has met somebody and they want it to be integrated right away. It takes time, and you have to earn that trust. And so I think what's unhealthy is having people in and out. So if you think this is a person who you're going to make a lifelong commitment to, or that's the expectation. And you have given that relationship enough time to build trust, which requires predictability. If you don't have predictability, you can't build trust. So if you're skipping that step and going, oh, I just trust them because I love them and I think they're really hot, you're not allowing yourself. So that takes a lot of time. So it might take a lot of months to build that predictability before you ever introduce them to your family, and building on that trust. And then you have to give room to, can't just be your agenda. Just because I want you to like that person right away.
Because there is some serious discomfort in that time, because I've gone through this, and like it is like, well, you would love him, or like, you have this agenda of like, I want it all to wrinkle out. I want it all to just like be fine,
especially when we're codependent.
Yeah, like for sure. And we
need everybody to be happy.
I wanted everybody to just like, let's just get the show on the road. Everybody's going to be great. And it's like, whoa, we gotta wait. Like that might be my agenda, which is probably unhealthy. Like, because it's like, there's no rush, right? Like, and I've always lived in this like massive rush, and I've learned throughout this process to slow it down. But I think that it is like a tendency of like you said, to like rush that process because of your own agenda.
Yeah. And I think, to your credit, I think one of the things you did right in your own situation, even when the kids weren't sure what to do with that. And sometimes that's because they're worrying about the other parent. Most of the time, younger kids are worried also about what the other parent is going to think and feel. You allowed them to go to therapy and work through those emotions and those feelings. And by giving that time, they feel validated, they feel heard, then they can discover that person. So when is it the right time, to circle back to the question, is the right time is not a number of days or months or whatever. It's about how long of a time is that predictability really established. Once, let's just say it's been 6 months and this is your person, you're in love, you're in a committed relationship that is the right one for you, then you ask the kid you invite them into that and say, this person's not going away. And so, I'd like to be able to go to lunch with them or go to the park, and we're going to go meet them. And if they flat out refuse, they want nothing to do with it, like a teenager especially, I'm not meeting so-and-so, and again, the reason this is hard to answer, because it's not always, it depends on what caused the divorce too, and whether you're with somebody who's gaslighting and
there's so
many different factors. But let's just take the healthiest of factors. It still would require, hey, let it settle. Meet the person. Don't just all of a sudden turn the floodgates, on and have them over there every day. Let it. We're going to play games again, or we're going to have another dinner. We're having them over for dinner. Just because
you're really comfortable with that person doesn't mean your kids are going to jump right into that.
They probably won't, except for, and this should be recognized, you may have a kid who is uber excited, but that's because we're codependent. So I think, like, you were probably more accepting of Ray because I
wanted you to be happy.
And you wanted me to be happy, and where Chelsea was more concerned with Dad. And so there's all different pieces of this, but here's the reality. Be honest with your kids about who this person is. Don't lie to them about that. Don't say, this is my friend, and then all of a sudden they realize, no, it's been your boyfriend for the last year, not your friend, because we don't stay up late.
I mean, my kids they basically knew Rob's social security number before they ever met him. Like, because it's like, well, we saw a picture of him on your phone. We saw you texting him. We heard, like, we saw his name. I mean, I'll never forget. Is he your
boyfriend?
Baylor, one day we were like driving in the car. This was, Rob and I were like maybe a couple months in or something like that. And like, he lived across the country. So it wasn't like he was like coming over or whatever. And Baylor like deadpans at me. He was from the front seat and he goes, so who's Rob Mull? And I was like, what? He's like, I see his name pop up on your phone. Like, I hear you talking to him. Like, who is he? And I was like, well, he's like somebody I've been talking to. And
if you're not ready, then say, you know what? I'm not ready to talk about that. Don't lie.
Yeah.
Just say, I'm not ready to talk to you about that. I appreciate that you're curious, but I'm not ready to explain who that person is. Maybe I'm not even sure. Maybe it's somebody I'm interested in. Maybe at the time it is a friend, but you have to live with your own conscience of that. Because they will ultimately, this is a major trust thing that comes back for so many people. They feel duped. They feel lied to. They wonder what else has been hidden in their lives.
Yeah.
It's a very big deal to,
We've been dating a year. How do we meet each other's families?
So again.
Oh, wait, really quickly. Sorry to stop you. one thing I want to note about this, in my scenario, it is a little different because it's not necessarily like fully blending.
Right.
I think those scenarios probably differ because if you're blending two families and there's kids on both sides, obviously, like, anyways, let's say we've been dating a year. How do we meet each other's
We both
families?
have kids.
Yeah.
So I think you be honest about what we're doing. You know what? We have been together now for a year, and it's really important to us that you guys meet each other because we see this relationship going somewhere in the future. So we're going to, either meet somewhere and casually get together. We're going to invite them over to our house. There's not, again, a set way because everybody's so different how they function. I think sometimes doing something social can be a way to break it in so it's not so awkward having them in your house, where you can't escape it. I think make it short. I would plan a 2-hour max kind of a introduction time, and I wouldn't spend the whole day together, for example, and let it sit. Check in later on. Don't ask right then, how did it go? Did you like that? I mean, don't put them on the spot.
Weren't they great?
Yeah, exactly. Don't you think we should get married?
Do you love your new sister?
Yeah. And recognize this, they may not. And
well, that's the next question. So what do I do if I'm dating somebody and my kids don't like this person?
Or their children. Or their children don't like them,
I think there's people too. It's like, I love this man, but like, man, his kids are assholes.
Well, and I think by the way, that is a huge thing for marriage issues. Because if you think they're assholes, it's probably because you're putting the responsibility on somebody else that's raising them. You might want to ask the guy you're about to marry why his kids are assholes. And sometimes it might be because he sucks as a parent. And that will come back to bite you in the butt later on because you will lose respect. Yeah. It's not just his ex-wife, I promise you. And that is where it's really critical. Pay attention because you're not going to come in and be the parent that's all of a sudden going to make everything better.
No, you're not a superhero.
You will lose respect for that person.
With all
Having said
respect.
that, what do we do? All bases covered. You have to accept it. The reality is you may never have the family that you dreamed of where everybody gets along and it's just this.
Doesn't mean they're the wrong person.
Doesn't mean that they're the wrong person. At some points, people get to make their choice. For God's sakes, how many times do I hear that I don't like my own mom?
Yeah.
So of course you might not like your stepmom, but I hear people say I love my stepmom and don't like my mom. So we just put it into a bigger category because it's forced. We're forcing the issue.
Well, I think as a parent, like, you would carry that guilt though of like, well, I'm making my kids be in a family with this person because I love them but they hate them.
Right. And again, why do they hate them? Sometimes it really is because of the toxic ex-parent who's poisoning them, but listen to them, go to therapy with them. Mm-hmm. I've done this. I've had a step parent come into therapy, with the mom and the child, and he was dedicated to trying to figure out what it was. It could be that a lot of the times that comes down to things are so different.
Yeah, they're different than your other parent.
And they also are changing their mother. Mm-hmm. So I was changing dad in many ways. Like, I'm sorry that we're checking your grades. That was a new thing,
Yeah. I think too, like, time is huge here. I feel like everybody wants this to just be like good to go from the get-go. And I will say in all of my experiences across the board, I feel like it just takes time. It takes time for everybody to acclimate. It takes time for the dust to settle a little bit. I think there's so much hype around it. There's so much like, oh, so-and-so's going to come over. We're going to do this with their family. Like, we're going to, do this with so-and-so. And like, sometimes it's just like letting it take the time that it deserves.
And it may not have anything to do with that person. So kids especially feel guilty if they like that person. They tell me this all the time. I don't want to hurt my dad's feelings, or I don't want to hurt my mom's feelings
if I
like that person. They feel that sense of betrayal. So the healthier the adults in the household is going to reflect how healthy the kids can be. But the other part of that is, if you're the parent who's trying to be healthy, this is where going to therapy can be really beneficial for your kid, because it's an outside influence who's also hopefully going to be able to
validate that it's okay to be.
It's healthy. And once they turn 18, they get to sort of start to make some of these decisions for themselves. But the younger kids, be mindful that they might really be stuck, and you may not even realize that it's a thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. I think so. Obviously, like a lot of this is focused on like the first time meeting or whatever. But like if you've been in a relationship with somebody for, you know, a couple years or whatever, and you're like, okay, it's time to like get married and like move everybody in together, or like a longer term solution. Like what do you like? How do you approach that?
So I think a couple of things. First of all, I think that not forgetting that your children still need alone time with you. They would probably have alone time with you if you were married to, you know, like their dad, for example. So spend alone time helps the blending because the kids don't have to only see that parent in that blended setting. And so remember that your kids want time alone with you still.
Yeah.
It's a different dynamic. It has nothing to do with whether they like or don't like the person you're with. I just think that prioritizing that can be really important. I think so holidays become a really big issue with this. And so Christmas doesn't have to happen on the 25th of December. It can happen on December 20th or another time.
Once you accept that, a lot changes.
Yeah, because I think we the goal is what? We want to spend time together and giving that opportunity and accepting siblings may not want to spend time together. So step siblings may not want to spend time together, and has nothing to do with the blended piece of it. So give people as your, you know, again, if they're kids, they're kind of forced into it and they'll be polite and they're going to be kind. You don't have to like this person, but you will respect them and they're part of our family. And you teach tolerance. But I do think the blending has helped when we're not fighting over holidays and birthdays and who gets them on what days. That is so much pressure for kids. It is so hard for them because they pick up your expressions more than you'll ever know. Kids tell me all the time. I'll say, well, why do you know that your mom doesn't like, you know, your dad's, you know, girlfriend? Because every time her name comes up, her nose curls. Oh. A kid tells me this, 6 years old.
Yeah.
7 years old. These kids are so smart. In the older they overhear, they pick up your tone. One kid told me the other day that there's always a tone when the mom talks about the dad. And so they pick that up.
Yeah.
So check yourself. If you want a happy blended family, check yourself first, because what you reflect is what your kids are going to most likely experience.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think like going back to being open and honest, like this is just like to reiterate this. I feel like in any scenario, whether you're dating this person, whether you're blending the family, like I think from the get-go, like telling them like what's happening, like keeping them, and this is with divorce, this is with anything. I think that like you're going through a major thing. We so often want to shelter our kids, but the goal here is really that like they feel like they're part of what's happening.
Yeah. They're part of it, but, and also listen to them. Kids are usually very good and they want to like people. So when they really don't like somebody, there might be a really good reason for that you are blinded to or want to be blinded to. And, you know, I think that is really, there's going to be a consequence long term when a kid is forced into, like, I have a patient whose, you know, stepdad moved out and he was pretty happy because he wasn't a nice guy. And now he's moved back in. The kid has no choice in that, but he will learn to not trust that mother to protect him because he had good reasons. It's not like, I just don't like that he, you know, makes me put my dishes away. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of things. Listen to your kids because they didn't choose to be here. So sometimes I think when we force our kids to be in really bad situations, then they resent us in the long term. They don't feel protected by us. So I would say if your kids really don't like the person you're with, ask yourself why and try to get a good understanding. And if it has any sense of reality, work with that person, that your partner. And then, you know, because I think that is a true reflection. The kid probably is the smart one in the group. Yeah. You know, there's something truly going on there that they feel out of control with. And I think,
the other thing that like I would say about this, just from my own experience, I don't know if this is like a therapy like approved, but I would say like grace in this scenario goes a long way for everybody. I know for me, like Rob has never had kids, and so like a lot of grace for like I realized like to go from 0 to 5 kids is like got to be the shock of a century, right? Like you're not going from like 0 to like a newborn, and then
these are not the quiet, you know, shy, quiet kids laying on their beds to.
No. So like I have to remind myself, like I have to have grace for like his tolerance of noise or his tolerance of like, you know, and like be like, hey, free pass to like go upstairs if you need to. Like I totally understand. Like this could probably, it's overwhelming for me. And like I birthed these children and raised them for the last 12 years, you know? And so like grace on that, but like also like having grace for yourself of like, this is going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to give me anxiety. It's going to feel, and then like grace for your kids of like, they might act out. They're going through something. Like they might have like, you know, they might be more stressed than usual, or this is different for them. And, you know, I think just like great, even for like my ex-husband, like grace of like, this has got to be uncomfortable. So I'm going to give you a little bit of grace of like, hey, I know you're feeling this way, but like, let's have a conversation of like how this needs to go down so that everybody is like comfortable, you know?
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know. I just think that like, again, I'm very much of the camp. Like I just want everything to be good and like feel great right away. But I think grace and time go a long way in those scenarios.
I think, and my, like for me, Ray has a lot of idiosyncrasies that can, you know, rub people a certain way. Ironically, so did my ex-husband. So does Kendra. And, you know, I would say myself, but I haven't been pointed out that maybe I talk too much or something, maybe too emotional. I don't know. We all have something. When it's our biological parents, we have a built-in grace.
Yeah, absolutely.
When it's a new person in our lives, we pinpoint all of that.
I'll never forget that this was like shortly after Rob moved in, and Baylor's like, Rob, where are your clothes? Like, why are you always without a shirt? And like, it dawned on me that like, he's never lived with like, you know, his dad is like always like, Rob is just always operates without a shirt on, you know? And it's like, for him, that's super abnormal. It's not bad or it's not good or anything like that. But like, you know, and I was like, well, he lives here too. Like he gets to like walk around without a shirt. But like, and then I caught myself later and I said to Baylor, I was like, hey, I know it's kind of like might feel weird for you or whatever,
Exactly.
but like, that's just like, you know, we're just all getting used to living together kind of thing. So just like random little things that you see in people where you're like, well, my dad doesn't do that. Or I'm, you know, I'm sure like eventually like those roles will be reversed and they're like, wait, why is she doing this or whatever. But, again, just like grace and like allowing your kids to say those things without taking it like because I jumped at it at first. I was like, he lives here too. Like he's allowed to like walk around without a shirt on. Like it's okay. Like it's not inappropriate, like whatever. But
so you came to Rob's defense rather than trying to, and then you caught yourself.
And then I caught myself and I said to Baylor, I was like, hey, I totally get like, you know, like that might feel weird or
totally
whatever.
Legit,
like,
yeah.
But like we're going to make mistakes. I think it's just like the awareness and like the ownership of like, this is new for everybody.
But I think to your point, what I would just point out in that is you were still thinking about it, which is why you went back and talked to him. And it's that. It's not, as parents, we are not perfect. We are growing and changing. That is a good parent to me. It's not avoiding making mistakes. It's recognizing that you do, that we're going to. But you know, one of the things that I think was really important too is, again, doing your own work. When I was, you know, in my early 20s, I remember thanking my younger stepdaughter. I mean, poor girl, can you just imagine? Again, 15 years old, and here now, ex-stepmom just moved out not very long ago, and then here's me. And I remember saying to her, thank you for vacuuming. And she looked right at me and said, don't fucking thank me for vacuuming my own house. Well, in my household, you said the F word, you were in deep doo-doo. And I remember Clark saying, don't talk to her that way. She is my wife, and you cannot speak to her that way. That is the other part of a blended family. At some point, we are the one. We are husband and wife, or whatever we are together, however you're blending, and you do have to present a united front to how we tolerate certain behaviors. But for her, it was an immediate flip, like, oh crud, they're on the same team, and. It's what's one of the other interesting things is you don't talk bad about the other person's parents. And that is one of the other things your dad was really good about. We never talked bad about the kids' mom, you know, to them or around them. We might have had some words here and there, you know, privately. But, and it's funny because she has called, my stepdaughter's called me several times in the past and said, you know, thank you for that. And it's something that she has emulated in her life, and her stepkids have said, you know, I really am grateful for that. So just a lesson that also helps the blending happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one more. I know, sorry. The other thing I want to just quickly say is if you're getting ready to blend a family, in like in this case, if the person that's moving in, so if it was you're like a Rob, for example, if Rob has certain like rules, for example, that he definitively was like, this would drive me crazy, implement those changes long before the person moves in, because otherwise it's associated with that person. And be aware of that. One of the things that all kids will tell me is how different the parent is. And it's not always that it's bad, but it is definitely for them a bad thing when all of a sudden we can't eat sugar cereal, or now I have to eat tofu and vegetables because dad's new wife eats tofu and vegetables and that's the new thing. And I've seen this with my grandkids, my other grandkids as well, not your kids, but that they've gone through this where the new parent all of a sudden implements all these rules. So of course they're going to resent that. And make sure you're checking yourself. Am I now pleasing this new person, or do I agree with these rules that didn't used to be here? Mm-hmm. And so ease into those. Don't just go with that all at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there you go. That's a few tips, stories for you on blended families. I think take heart that it's not easy. It's not really supposed to be easy, to be totally honest with you, but it is very doable. And I think like blended families can flourish and be a really beautiful thing. Thanks for listening to today's group therapy. There is a link in the show description below if you want to ask questions for next time, or if you have podcast topic ideas, anything that you want to share with us. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Summer of Me. You can listen to episodes on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube. Come hang out and follow my chaos on Instagram @KendraForNow. See you next time.